Welcome to Expressions of Leadership, a podcast showcasing the many faces of leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry. From teachers to artists to C-suite leaders, we explore how people own their authentic leadership, celebrate their triumphs, overcome challenges, and share lessons learned. In this episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with Aaron Stryker. Aaron is the co-founder and executive director of Dharma Gates, a nonprofit making deep meditation practice accessible to young adults. Since founding the organization in 2019 through Wesleyan University's Petrocelli Center for Social Entrepreneurship, he has scaled it to serve over 1,400 adults through 24 multi-day meditation retreats nationwide. Welcome to the Expressions of Leadership podcast. It's lovely to have you, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's nice to be here.
So, what inspired you to start Dharma Gates?
Yeah, let's see. So I encountered the world of meditation really first through the yoga tradition, through the practice of Ashtanga Yoga when I was 18, and then when I was 20, I had the chance to visit a Zen monastery in the upstate New York called Daibusatsu Zendo. I had connected to a friend at Wesleyan who spent 3 months there between he had transferred universities and between his two stints at McGill and then at Wesleyan, he did a 3 month training period at this monastery. And so over, you know, I think on that trip, it was 2017, I went up and yeah, I had a really powerful experience just, spending time with the monastics there and learning the basic Zen forms and their meditation technique. And I became pretty yeah I went pretty full on pretty quickly with that practice. It was really powerful for me and kind of gave me, I think, a lifeline in a way in the context of that environment, the sort of uh, academic environment in that time and now, it was only 5, 6 years ago. Was really, really a lot of mental challenges among young people. There's a
Mhm.
lot of headlines that have been coming out around mental illness among young people today, and it was true then, it's true now, it's getting worse. But the the overall culture, I think, of Wesleyan was, people aren't that happy, and uh, for me, I don't think I was particularly skillful in orientation at first in my practice, but I had the attitude of if I just meditate enough, these problems will go away. And it kind of worked for I meditated a lot. I had some friends, we would like uh pregame parties by meditating and then go see how long we could stay at parties, and like it was a very interesting little group of us who got really, really into it basically. Um and we started a student group uh called West Sangha, which sort of was trying to bring some of the kind of really Zen practice to campus as much as we could. Very young, and in some ways, retrospectively, it was, it's hard to do that in a very mature way when you're 19, 20.
Mhm.
But we tried. And but one thing we did see is some of the programming that we organized, bringing together groups of young people in uh, monastic environments, bringing them to monasteries. We did that a number of times, or organizing kind of intensive practice experiences with just cohorts of young people. Those went really, really well. Like we are hitting something there that it didn't exist and was so needed. It was so obvious that it was needed based on the reception. And so, yeah, I spent my breaks basically living at Zen communities, and returned for my senior year with the idea of, how do we help more young people find out that these communities are there as a resource? Because there are a lot of them and people don't know. They don't they don't even realize that there are monasteries in the US and you can just go live there and they're not going to charge you money. Um, and yeah, you can stay and practice and ordain if you want. You can stay as long as you want. And that these are for us, right? These places have been, they're designed to carry these lineages of practice, these ways of approaching meditation that can skillfully guide us very, very deep, much deeper than we could really go ourselves. There are
Hmm.
these kind of cultural containers for this, and the reason they're here is because people preserved them and brought them here intentionally. And to me, it was like a revelation. It was like, wow, like the answer to this really huge crisis in our culture, which is young people's mental health and really all of our mental health. It's not young people, I think, is this very specific kind of canary in the coal mine for a culture that doesn't have a good answer to this question anymore of what does it mean to be a whole happy person. Uh, it's like just being handed this on like a silver platter, like in like a couple hours away, and like in basically in our backyard. These traditions are here. Um, so that was my experience, and I started working with the Patricelli Center at Wesleyan and had an amazing experience there with a really, really wonderful mentor named Michaela Kingsley, who really encouraged me to take this more seriously because I wasn't, to me it was a cool idea, but I didn't really think like it was actually going to happen. And she pushed me to do it. I'd say really pushed, I almost gave up on it. That there's this great story where at the end of that semester, she basically told me to go to this pitch competition to pitch Dharma Gates to this, Connecticut Best New Ventures competition. And so I did, and we got best executive summary or something. We got $500. But the fact that those people at the judges at that conference who knew nothing about meditation, nothing about Buddhism, they took it seriously enough to give an award, that
Hmm.
made me think like, okay, there's actually something really real here because those people shouldn't understand this and they still think it's a good idea.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, we started doing some kind of MVP programming with an alum I connected to who was also really excited about this, Miles, and got a lot of traction pretty quickly with that kind of first programming we ran at different universities, and got one other grant from a big Buddhist foundation that has since funded us a few times. Can't say foundation. And with that and some seed funding from Patricelli Center, we started.
Wow. Pretty amazing. And as we say, to lead is to guide. And a lot of what you're doing is really guiding these young people. And so, what do you believe to be true about leadership?
It's a funny, it's funny to like be asked this question in a way because I never thought I'm gonna become a leader. I think it was more seeing something that was so obviously needed to be done. Like it's like reality's asking me to do this.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, I will. I think what I did is said yes to being like willing to take the next step as long as reality kept asking, as long as there was that clear opening. And I early on went to a number of mentors because I had crazy imposter syndrome. I was like, I'm 22. I'm not like I have no experience with Buddhism almost. I'm, not no nonprofit experience. I don't feel qualified to do this. And I asked to a few very senior Zen teachers what they thought. Like, should I actually try this? And they both said yes. They told me you will learn through the process. And as long as I keep an attitude of humility in relationship to the lineages, as long as I'm not misrepresenting, I'm not speaking on behalf of these. these communities, and I'm very clear about what that relationship is, then it's in integrity. And
Mm.
so my experience has been seeing a need, starting to do it, and then maybe if I can speak to leadership, it's really like successfully communicating why that is important to other people, like really being passionate about what you're doing and confident enough that it's good, that you kind of pull other people into it because they also see that when they hear your excitement, your enthusiasm, and the results of your work, they want to help. And then more people want to
Hmm.
help. And so you could become a leader in that way. My experience of becoming a leader, as much as I am one now, is not uh it's just that more people get involved, and I've been doing it the longest of anybody at Dharma Gates, at least. And we have our mentors too, so there's people with more experience than us in a lot of ways too. But within this narrow container of the people who are doing this work, uh, I have, some experience based on doing it for 6 years, and someone else who's come on like in the last year or two. I can be a leader in that way. But yeah, I think of it almost as leadership as a byproduct of caring. And it's sort of an inevitability.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it's just some of my thoughts. Yeah.
Many of those Roshis you spoke to said this will be an opportunity for you to
Mm.
learn. So, how have those learnings influenced the way that you continue to lead the organization and also those people who are participating in your offerings and the events?
Oh, I mean, uh, so many ways, starting a nonprofit when you don't have any experience in nonprofits or even in organizations is a crazy thing to do because you're trying to learn what to do and do it at the same time. Where, in a lot of jobs in school or what have you, you get handed an assignment and you're you know what the assignment is, you just have to do it. But it's different when there's figuring out what to do and doing it are both the job. Um, and there's a lot of trial and error and, you know, uh, making mistakes and doing things poorly. And thankfully, there was a lot of space, I think, in the beginning. Like we had very little overhead cost and took a while to really, operating very simply, and took a while to really build the foundation of the org to, you know, function reasonably well. We're learning. We're still getting better and better, and really in the process of kind of professionalizing a lot now. Um, but I think the biggest things I've probably learned are, well, there's a concept I was actually taught at Wesleyan, which was really, really helpful, which was this notion of the like a kind of minimum viable product, or the MVP, or this sense that a good organization is always going to be, uh, you don't want to be coming from your head from big ideas necessarily about what you would want to be true. You want to be starting with small ideas and trying them and getting as much real world feedback as possible, and constantly be basing your work on this kind of dialogue with reality. And never, when you start taking really big swings without being receptive to what's being asked for, then you start taking a lot of risk and you're gonna miss. And so my experience has been really trying to be listening and be in a really receptive relationship to all of the data coming in from people, from what we're doing, because as when you're starting a nonprofit from no experience, you're messing up most things all the time. And then, but if you can convert that experience of messing up into learning effectively and mess up in ways that aren't catastrophic, then then it becomes this growth process, and that growth process becomes refinement and eventually skill. And so I think leadership is not fundamentally different than that. It's you try to be a manager for the first time. I think I'm really learning a lot right now in the org about managing people because I didn't have to do that at first. It was kind of just me. And now I'm learning what HR is and and
Hmm.
about a lot of these systems and how to, learn how to like be affirming and support people and help people come up with a pathway in the organization and how do they want to develop through working with Dharma Gates. And none of this is all new to me, but uh, but it's learnable and it's learnable through kind of being willing to listen and being willing to
Hmm.
modify, being willing to grow with the org and being not having a fixed view of this is how Dharma Gates needs to be. Rather, Dharma Gates, I think of it as Dharma Gates wants to be something. There is an expression of Dharma Gates, which is meeting the need. And that's what Dharma Gates wants to be. And my job is to be facilitate that, but not be really in charge of that. I'm just trying to like support Dharma Gates to be what it wants to be.
Hmm.
Right? And so uh, I think that's another way to speak about my what I've learned, my approach to guiding this thing as much as I am.
Some of my mentors, Barry Posner and Jim Kouzes, always talk about the fact that the best leaders are also the best learners.
Mhm.
And so this is a part of the process of being a leader is to grow through those experiences and be open to learning.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's if you're not learning, you're shutting yourself off to parts of reality. And I mean, that's the opposite of Buddhism. It's the
Mhm.
opposite of wisdom.
Mhm.
Wisdom is seeing, being willing to see.
And opening up to the reality in front of you and how are
Mhm.
we working with that reality versus just trying to
Mm.
resist it or ignore it or think that there's some other way that we can get around it, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, what are the core values that you have as a leader, and how do you ensure that your leadership reflects those core values?
I think I'm learning. I feel more clear about my core values than I do about uh I think I'm in some ways still learning how to bring my core values into all aspects of my life, right? It's a process. It's not like we we are doing it successfully all of the time. But I sort of have an aspirational, there's a direction there. And you know, they say sometimes that I guess in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition that the there's this notion of enlightenment, right? But enlightenment really they you could think of it as like two wings of a bird, and one side is wisdom and one side is compassion, and those have to be balancing each other. And if there's a bird with one wing, it's not a very effective bird. And I think if someone was to say like what is my like core values uh in any situation, it doesn't matter if it's leadership or not. I hope I can be moving in the direction of those two things, of wisdom and caring and really compassion in the Buddhist framework arises out of wisdom, um, and in some ways vice versa. And wisdom is really just the seeing our lives as they actually are, which is seeing, we're these beings
Hmm.
that are deeply, deeply conditioned by we're vulnerable to so many causes and we have the ability to care about other people, and we have the ability to hurt other people. And the main point of agency we have in our lives is our minds and how we treat our minds and how we treat other people and how we treat you know our lives. And so coming with sort of the orientation that humans have this like deep vulnerability and deep agency, and that taking deep care of our lives and our minds is really the most important thing that any of us can do. And there's a lot of things that come downstream from that, right? That's why Buddhism becomes a practice. It's why people spend 20 years in monasteries meditating or their whole lives, or because we can know this intellectually. We can know, you know, we're gonna die and we're fragile beings and we want to be good people and all of this, but actually following through it's tough. And so
Mhm.
we have to also be habituating ourselves to that reality and committed to doing that and realizing how much really goes into that. It's not a simple thing. And having a lot of respect for people who've deeply made that commitment uh to to be with reality as it is. And I'd say sort of that whole when you take up the practice of meditation very seriously, let's say, it tends to open into a lot of you learn a lot of other things.
Mhm.
And so you could say like if wisdom and compassion are the core, those are just ideas. Those are nice ideas. But if you try to live those, a lot of other things open up out of that, and then yeah, it becomes a whole spiritual tradition, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, you know, I thought I would be a monk if I didn't. Dharma Gates started, and I think it's a very important thing. But to me, it's never been separate really from my personal practice. It's always like this is my service in the world. It's a part of what I'm doing in the world right now. But all of my kind of frameworks in my life are I'm living at a Tibetan Buddhist hermitage right now. You can see a little bit up
Mhm.
there, like I've been doing in Buddhist communities basically since graduating, and um, it's all merged.
What a wonderful metaphor of wisdom and compassion representing two wings of a bird. And I appreciate hearing how those values are woven into your life, both professionally and personally. And really knowing and connecting to one's values is essential for leaders to show up in a more self assured and authentic way. And I see from your event impact page on your website that being clear about one's values and how one wants to live is one of those benefits participants say that they experience from your retreats. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I think meditation has been sold in the US in kind of a popular uh, discourse as the main benefit being stress relief. Um, it's sort of out there now that meditation relieves stress. And to me, that's really not the most interesting thing about it. It that's a thing that can happen. And but it also it does so much more than that. And it's a little bit difficult to talk about some of the experiences that happen in retreat. But one thing I think I can say is uh, we absorb a lot of views and beliefs and thoughts about ourselves and about the world just by proxy of family, parents, school, culture, situations we find ourselves in that really aren't ours. They're not we haven't really taken a deep ownership of them, or if we have, we don't really like want to. These sort of beliefs just kind of inhabit us, and we don't see it because we've just been brought up in it, right? It's like you grow up in a family where everybody um, is used to like yelling at each other, and like there's certain forms of, you know, family toxicity that are common, but and then you get out into the world and you realize that maybe you go to a friend's house at one point and you realize they're not doing that, and your whole life has been like thinking that this was a normal way of relating, and actually you don't, it was hurtful, but it's only in that contrast that you realized it was hurtful. Um, and so I think what can happen on meditation retreats, if it gives a space for the mind to really, really deeply relax and let go, including of a lot of beliefs that
Hmm.
we're holding. A lot of times,
Hmm.
beliefs actually show up as a kind of deep bodily tension, like we're trying to make ourselves be a certain way, we're
Hmm.
trying to make the world be a certain way. And when you create a container where you can relax enough to let go of that belief about yourself or about the world, you get to experience, going to that family's house, that friend's house, and learning what it's like to not be an environment where everybody's yelling at each other all the time. But really, it's the difference between you yelling at yourself all the time and you learning how to not yell at yourself all the time. This all
Hmm.
happens in us. And that is how people can start to clarify values on a retreat, because you learn which habits, which beliefs, which things don't go away, which things, when you are deeply, deeply relaxed and you're deeply content in your own mind, what's there, what's left. And
Hmm.
then that's a, I think it's a deeply personal inquiry. And that's why people might have different values. People don't all care about the same things, but what we can do is we can create a container where people have the opportunity to really let go and relax and learn what that direction feels like in their nervous system. And that will have, for almost everybody, a deeply healing effect in itself, because they get to experience the delta, they get to experience that the difference between that way of being in the world and their normal daily functioning, which is usually we're running around trying to, solve all these problems that have been put in our heads by other people that aren't even that important to us. And we we've just so used to thinking they are.
There's that tension that comes from these beliefs that we are holding to be true. And part of that is just because of the fact that we feel we need to have some sort of control.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it
Mm.
comes right back to our discussion a little bit ago about, leadership is about seeing reality. It's about being willing to be with what's really happening. And
Hmm.
if we're clouded over by we really want a certain outcome, we want something to be happening, or we have so much view of ourself being a certain person in that situation, it ends up being very confusing. It's hard to make good decisions. So
Hmm.
it all kind of ties together, where this aspect of wisdom is really being willing to be with things as they are, and not letting what we want to be true be in the way of that.
Hmm. And
Mm.
that's a real challenge, right? For
Yeah,
anyone.
yeah,
That's a real challenge.
totally, definitely.
So in times of challenge in general, what do you do to develop resilience as a leader? And then how do you also foster that in other people?
So from the beginning of this role, I kind of made an internal commitment that I wouldn't do this the way that a lot of, I think, startup founders do what they do, which is they work 60-hour weeks and they burn themselves out and they uh, there's this kind of martyrdom to a cause that can really, it's kind of a popular trope in this culture. And I think it's not good in any situation, any organization to do that. But in this case in particular, it's would be deeply hypocritical for me to be holding the work in that way and trying to share Buddhist values. It's not, they're not the same thing. And what what I sort of resolved is that I'm going to be doing a lot of personal retreat and that taking a quite a bit of time away from the work completely in the work flow of being Dharma Gates executive director. I've been trying to do 2 3 months of personal retreat a year where I'm not accessible. And that has felt extremely important because I'm a young person. I'm a young practitioner. I'm 28, 29 in a few months, but the people we're working with in this organization, like a lot of these senior teachers and practitioners, have been doing this for decades and decades. And for me to be hold this organization in a remotely skillful way as a person as young as I am in this kind of this work, creating that distance intentionally and really continuing to prioritize my personal practice and learning how to continually be a student. Like go to a Zen monastery. There's a place in upstate New York that I have a pretty strong connection to, Zen Mountain Monastery, and just do a retreat there regularly, not as an ED, not as anything. I'm just a guy. I'm relatively, you know, just Joe Schmo meditator there, right? And that is extremely healthy. It's very, very balancing.
Mhm.
Um, because usually challenge happens when there's friction between our, what in some ways this is sort of a Buddhist framework, but I think it's really true, is if we're unwilling to keep up with the rate of change of reality, reality is changing. It's always moving. There's always going to be things happening. Sometimes they're more abrasive, sometimes they're less. But if we're able to actually be with that rate of change, we're willing to be with what's arising without holding on to anything, without any friction, there's no suffering there. Even if it's a big event, even if it's something that on paper should be making us very upset. If we're really fluid in our lives with adapting, with moving, with not holding on to how things should be, it actually moves smoothly. And so when there's challenge, it means we're holding on to something. It means that we want reality to be doing one thing and it's doing another thing. And continually creating a space to uh, have some distance, to
Mhm.
not be right in the middle of the whirlwind, and to look at what's really happening for me, for the organization, but uh, what's that friction? Why am I resisting what's trying to happen here? And not have any stake in it. Like in the context of retreat, I don't have to like maintain my ED persona and be like, you know, constantly on all the time. And I can kind of like really be with that question in a way that allows it um, to do its work and
Mhm.
be willing to be wrong, be willing to be like really upset and
Mhm.
and yeah, constantly making sure that space is a part of my life and a part of the role.
It sounds like having that space as well as having that clear seeing is a source of resilience for you and also for others that are participating in these experiences.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, the when we say Dharma Gates is about helping open pathways into deep meditation practice for young people, what is really being talked about there is when people move from a daily practice to retreats. Um, the ability to do retreat is, in some in some ways, all of our staff are just like meditation retreat, like addicts, like, um, because there's something that happens in that context where it's not just that you're meditating all day. That matters a lot, but it's also, you're not using your phone. You don't have anybody, you're in silence, for maybe a week, and nobody's usually we're constantly getting this external feedback about uh just it can be very innocuous things, but it's signaling to us who we are and how we should be. And retreat allows us to really drop a lot of the uh normal self thing that we do. And
Hmm.
within that container, within that context, go more deeply into some of those questions and really, really see what we are and what we're about. Um and a lot of answers can come from that space that even if you do the same amount of meditation over the course of a few months or something as just in daily life, it's hard to hit the same depth sometimes.
What's been most rewarding for you in building Dharma Gates?
A lot of what we do is run multi-day meditation retreats. Um, it's very difficult sometimes to see the impact of those because a lot of people come on the retreats. They fill out a little survey at the end, but aside from that, they just kind of go off into the world, and we don't fully know how did it affect them. Um, so now that we've been going for 5 or 6 years, we actually have enough, it's been enough time to start to see some of the downstream impacts in the sense of people's lives and how they've developed a bit. And it's always really inspiring to see somebody come back or where a Dharma Gates retreat was a very pivotal moment for them that put them on a different track. And because of that, maybe they've done a bunch more things that were more aligned with what they really cared about. And they come back after a few years and they're like, I'm a completely different person now. And I love my life or like what I'm doing. And Dharma Gates isn't completely responsible. They're also responsible. But
Hmm.
but what we want to do is be that point where people can like have that inflection point, realize there's something else possible, and then start heading that way. Like they then with their life energy can say, I'm choosing that route instead of that route. And we're just showing them that there's this divergence. You
Hmm.
can do what 95% of young people in the US are doing right now and doom scroll and it
Hmm.
doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
Um, and there's this other way. And um, when somebody really takes to it, that's when Dharma Gates mission is working. It's not when somebody becomes a Dharma Gates groupie and tries to come on all of our retreats forever because we have like, they're free. And
Hmm.
that's nice and people are welcome to come, but when they really see that invitation and they decide to step into that with their life and make their life uh, in alignment with what they really care about, that's uh that's what we're trying to do.
Hmm.
So that's always beautiful. I mean, it's starting to happen more and more because it's been long enough time.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Well, as we come up to the final segment of today's episode, We like to ask our guests one advice question and one fun question. So we'll start with the advice question. If someone was building their life like a puzzle, what advice would you give them to find the right pieces?
Well, one of the right pieces is always heart. It's always the right. Like there's always some part of us that knows, uh, maybe not the whole answer, but it can feel the direction, right? And what happens to people is they get so tangled up in stress and views and things that they forget that they already have the most important piece, you know, and
Mhm.
that if you're building your life like a puzzle, really take the time to like see the situation fully and excavate, study the pieces. What are you working with? And start with, you know, it's cliche, but like start with the heart piece. Start with
Mhm.
the uh the basic intention and get very, very clear about that. And then everything else, like you can kind of sort of figure it out. It sort of falls into place.
And now for the fun question. What animal do you think best represents your personality?
I've always really liked bears. Um, I don't know if it they represent my personality deeply, but I also I resonate with the cadence of just kind of waddling around in the woods, like eating berries and things and being pretty gentle, but also um, powerful. And then bears do retreat like also 6 months a year. And then they go get things done. So quite similar in a certain way.
Can you share with the audience how they can learn more about Dharma Gates?
Yeah. So you're always welcome to visit our website, dharma-gates.org. We have a newsletter. You're welcome to subscribe there. That kind of shares about all of our offerings. And in terms of if there's any interest in getting involved with Dharma Gates anyway and supporting, you're always welcome to reach out by email to I believe on our contact form on the website. That'll go to us or Aaron@dharmagates.org or however you can find to get in touch with us. Happy to talk. We're a pretty quickly growing small nonprofit. We can use all kinds of help and support. So love to be in conversation.
Well, Aaron, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom and your sense of compassion on the Expressions of Leadership podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation.
Thank you also to our audience for tuning in and spending your time with us today. If you haven't done so already, make sure to click on that follow button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Have a guest you'd like us to interview? Questions, ideas, or just want to say hello? You can reach us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com or connect with us on Instagram or YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks to our amazing team behind the scenes for making this podcast possible, including our sound engineer, Graham Palmer, and my chief encourager and advisor, Jeremiah Higgins. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and we'll see you soon. Take care.